It all started on a Friday, June 6, 2025. The sun was out, but a shadow was falling over Los Angeles. That shadow was a series of massive immigration raids ordered by President Donald Trump. Agents from Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, began sweeping through neighborhoods across LA County. They were at car washes, in apartment buildings, and on the streets. Their mission was to find and arrest undocumented migrants. The White House said this was about law and order, but for many people in the city, it felt like an attack on their families, their neighbors, and their friends. It was the spark that would soon ignite a city. The reaction was almost immediate. People started gathering to protest what they saw as an unjust and cruel operation. At first, these were peaceful gatherings. Families marched with signs, activists gave speeches, and community leaders called for calm and an end to the raids. They wanted to show solidarity with the immigrant communities that were living in fear. The initial protests were a powerful display of unity, with people from all walks of life coming together to voice their opposition. They chanted slogans, sang songs, and demanded that their city leaders stand up to the federal government's actions. The air was thick with emotion, a mix of anger, sadness, and defiance. The fear in immigrant communities was real and widespread. People were afraid to go to work, to take their kids to school, or even to leave their homes. The raids didn't just target individuals, they targeted the very fabric of daily life for a huge part of the city's population. The federal government reported that they arrested 330 migrants in the first few days, stating that about a third had prior criminal records. But for the people watching their communities get torn apart, these numbers didn't matter. They saw family members and hardworking neighbors being taken away, and it created a sense of desperation and helplessness that quickly turned to anger. This wasn't just happening in a vacuum. A recent poll showed that a slight majority of Americans, around 54%, actually approved of the president's deportation policies. This division in the country added another layer of tension to the situation in Los Angeles. While protesters in LA saw the raids as inhumane, many people elsewhere in the country supported them as a necessary step for immigration control. This national split in opinion meant that the protesters in Los Angeles felt like they were not only fighting against federal agents on their streets, but also against a tide of public opinion that didn't understand their reality. The stage was set for a major confrontation. For a couple of days, the protests remained largely peaceful, but the tension was building with every new report of an ICE raid. The breaking point came over the weekend. As more people poured into the streets, the atmosphere began to change. The frustration boiled over into direct confrontations with law enforcement. Skirmishes broke out, and soon, the peaceful marches turned into chaotic scenes of unrest. Some groups of protesters, feeling that their peaceful message was being ignored, began to act out. Vandalism and looting started to occur, particularly in the downtown area. The sound of chanting was replaced by the sound of breaking glass and sirens. The police response was swift and forceful. The Los Angeles Police Department, along with LA County Sheriff's deputies, moved in to control the crowds. They declared the gatherings unlawful assemblies, which gave them the authority to use more aggressive tactics to disperse people. Officers in riot gear formed lines, pushing protesters back. They used what are called less lethal rounds, like rubber bullets and foam projectiles, to break up the crowds. Mounted police on horseback were also used to push people out of the streets. These actions, meant to restore order, often had the opposite effect, further angering the protesters and leading to more intense clashes. In an effort to regain control, Louisiana Mayor Karen Bass took a significant step. On Tuesday, June 10th, she imposed a strict curfew on a 1 square mile area of downtown Los Angeles from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. The goal was to clear the streets and prevent the looting and violence that had been happening at night. For the people living and working in that area, it felt like their city was under lockdown. Restaurants and bars had to close early, and arts venues like the LA Philharmonic cancelled their shows. The curfew was a clear sign that the city's leadership was struggling to manage the escalating crisis. The situation became even more complicated for journalists trying to cover the events. Several reporters on the ground stated that they were targeted by police with less lethal rounds, even after they clearly identified themselves as members of the press. This raised serious concerns about freedom of the press and the tactics being used by law enforcement. Meanwhile, the arrests mounted. By Wednesday, nearly 400 people had been arrested in connection with the protests. Most were for failing to disperse, but there were also arrests for curfew violations and more serious charges, like possession of a firearm and even assault on a police officer. The city was in a state of chaos. As the unrest continued to grow, the situation took a dramatic turn. President Trump announced that he was sending federal troops to Los Angeles. He ordered the deployment of 4,000 National Guard soldiers and 700 Marines to the area. This was a massive show of force, and it immediately escalated the conflict from a local issue to a national standoff. The president defended his decision by saying he needed to prevent the city from being conquered by a foreign enemy, and he referred to the protesters as animals. His language was highly inflammatory and only added fuel to the fire, framing the situation as a war rather than a civil protest. The troops began arriving and setting up at local military bases like Seal Beach and Los Alamitos. Their stated mission was not to act as local police or make arrests themselves. Instead, they were tasked with protecting federal property, such as federal buildings and courthouses, and supporting federal personnel. However, they were given the authority to detain protesters until local police could arrive to make an official arrest. This created a confusing and intimidating military presence on the streets of an American city. The sight of soldiers in uniform became another source of tension for residents already on edge. Even more controversially, a special group of 500 National Guard troops was specifically trained to accompany ICE agents on their immigration raids. This move blurred the lines between the military and civilian law enforcement in a way that deeply worried civil rights advocates. It meant that the military was now directly involved in carrying out the very raids that had sparked the protests in the first place. For the protesters, this was confirmation that the federal government was using military power to enforce its controversial immigration policies against its own people. It was a move that many saw as a dangerous overreach of federal authority. The cost of this deployment was staggering, projected to be around $134 million. But the true cost was measured in the fear and division it created. The presence of the military did not calm the situation. Instead, it solidified the feeling among protesters that they were fighting an oppressive force. The image of soldiers on American streets, deployed against American citizens, became a powerful symbol of the deep divisions in the country. It was a tactic designed to show strength and restore order, but for many in Los Angeles, it looked like an occupation. The deployment of federal troops immediately created a massive political firestorm, pitting the state of California against the federal government. California Governor Gavin Newsom was furious. He called the president's action a brazen abuse of power and an assault on democracy. He accused President Trump of deliberately fanning the flames of unrest for political gain instead of trying to de-escalate the situation. LA Mayor Karen Bass echoed this sentiment, condemning the raids as political theater rooted in fear and demanding that they be stopped. The leaders of California and its largest city were in open defiance of the White House. This political battle quickly moved into the legal arena. The state of California filed a lawsuit challenging the legality of sending federal troops to Los Angeles without the governor's consent. The lawsuit argued that the deployment violated the 10th Amendment of the Constitution, which reserves powers for the states. An emergency motion to block the troops was denied at first, but a court hearing was set for June 12 today to hear the full arguments. On the other side, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth insisted that the deployment was completely lawful and constitutional, setting the stage for a major legal showdown over states' rights and presidential power. The impact on the people of Los Angeles was devastating. The constant fear of raids and the chaos of the riots disrupted every aspect of life. Immigrant families were torn apart, and many people were afraid to venture outside. Businesses, especially in the downtown area, suffered huge financial losses from the curfews and the general sense of danger. The city, known for its vibrant and diverse culture, felt fractured and wounded. The unrest also spread beyond LA, with solidarity protests popping up in at least 10 other major US cities, from New York to San Francisco, showing that the anger and frustration were shared across the nation. Looking back, the riots of June 2025 serve as a harsh lesson about what can happen when political division and aggressive policies collide with public fear and anger. The events exposed the deep rifts in American society over immigration and the use of federal power. While the violence has subsided for now, the scars remain. Trust between communities and law enforcement has been damaged, and the political relationship between California and the federal government is in tatters. Los Angeles is a resilient city, but healing from these events will require more than just clearing the streets. It will require rebuilding trust and finding a way to address the root causes of the anger that set the city ablaze.